For some of us, we grow up with leadership instincts. These can be helpful for us to step into the role of a leader, but there is always more to learn. Welcome to Tradies Who Lead, the podcast about everyday leadership for everyday legends. I'm Ashley Beltecki, a diesel mechanic by trade and your host. Today we are joined by Andrew Hopkins, a Melbourne carpenter, business owner, digital content creator and father. Hoppo's journey is relatable to many. For over 8 years, he has managed teams of tradespeople in Melbourne through his business Hopkins Construction. Along the way, he developed a passion for creating an online presence, highlighting the skills and appreciation for his trade. He maintains a strong presence online, showcasing the rewards and opportunities of being a tradesperson and how a trade career can empower others to take charge of their lives. Thanks for joining me on the podcast today, Hoppo. So when it comes to your leadership journey, you've obviously been in business for quite a few years now. Where did your leadership journey begin?
Probably from a really young age, I kind of knew. I felt there was always it felt like a bit of a ceiling there. Like I knew there was more, sort of like a glass, and I could sort of see it. Like I wanted more, but I just didn't have. I don't know if I just didn't have the heart for it. I didn't have the voice for it yet. Like I always wanted to run a business. From a young age, I wanted to run a business, but I was a little bit outspoken. I was like, there's got to be. It's in there, you know. So it's probably there was one sort of defining moment. I remember it's in high school. It's a little bit of a sad story, but for me, it was a really, really defining moment where, unfortunately, we lost one of our teachers to cancer. I remember I was the class captain at the time, and I was sitting there in our sort of morning homeroom, I guess, and the teacher just couldn't put words together, and everyone was sort of, just being kids and being naughty, and I was like, this is like, you sort of get that lump in your throat, and you're like, this is my moment, but I don't think I can do it. I don't think I can do it. And I remember hopping up and walking down and sort of hugging the teacher and just going like, and then just getting into it, and everyone just stopped. Everyone listened, everyone looked at me, and I was like, I was shitting myself. I was shitting myself, and I'm like, this is an unfortunate moment, but this is where it really clicked for me. I was like, this is what I want. This is, put into a position where sink or swim. And that was it for me. And from then on, it was, I wanted to captain everything. I wanted to do everything. I wanted to lead. I wanted to run a business. And it was, that's where it really clicked for me.
When it comes to leadership, I find it's a really hard concept to define. Like you'll go on the internet, you'll Google leadership, and you'll get definitions about management and leadership styles. And so much of leadership is so conceptual. For me, I often try to define it around action and choosing who I want to be. But what is that leadership definition for you?
Leadership to me, I think, is like setting a level of standards and values, and not only sort of setting them, but implementing them as well, and recognizing that people are on different levels and then to be led in different ways, and sort of respecting that, not trying to treat everyone the same, but trying to get the most out of people, but in a respectful way, how they're meant to be led.
I know we've had chats in the past, and I definitely like that you bring this to the conversation because so much of leadership, or even what we sometimes think about how we have to act in a workplace, we think it's very black and white. Like there's a right way to do something and there's a wrong way to do something. But actually, when you're leading a team and leading people, there's this gray zone of, well, everyone needs something different and you can't have just one style. And that's not to say you can't be authentic to yourself, but you have to be very flexible with how you approach people in different situations. So is there like an example when you said there was kind of like a turning point for you where you learned the hard way? What was that turning point or that journey that kind of made you realize that, your one style wasn't enough to lead a team effectively?
My generation were brought up with, like you said, it's this way or it's the highway. Like my boss is the last generation of people that were getting hit at work, like the strap at work for stuffing things up. So it was like, you did what you were told. And I got brought up in that way, a lot more gentle, but it was very, like you said, black and white. So then when I come into business and you still got that mindset, run everywhere, you go hammer and tong, and you're very lucky to have a job. And then you come into trying to teach people, and like we had one stage we had about, I think we had about 6 apprentices. We had a couple of good guys leave, and I was like, to me, it was like, everything I'm doing is right. they're leaving. It's nothing, you know what I mean? And then you sort of realize, and my partner at the time's like, I think you're trying to teach too many chiefs, not enough Indians. Like, you can't just turn everyone into an army of Trojans, you know? Like, we had one guy who was a DJ on the weekends, and he'd come to work and he wouldn't really care too much about work. And they used to chip me, why don't you want to be the best landscaper you can be or the best carpenter you can be? And I was told, like, he's working to live, not living to work. Like, you got to realize that not everyone has a passion like you, and you got to learn to adapt. And it took some time to sink in, and then how to treat people and recognize, like, that's for the weekend. And maybe if you recognize more and discuss to them what their passions are and about the weekend, almost like almost not reward them in a way, but try to implement, all right, this is what you can utilize your values at work and your work, mindset at work, how you can implement that to what you can do on the weekend, and try to be flexible in that sort of way. Cause I didn't really know how to deal with it. It was hard.
Yeah.
It worked. The guy stuck around. So, and implementing leaders, like we did. Have you seen the disc tests? The leadership test?
There's a few out there, yeah, I've done some before, and they can sometimes hit some sore spots, which is good for growth.
Not they ever. Yeah. It's pretty humbling sometimes. And I did that with my main foreman and another supervisor I had, and we're all quite different. Me and the main supervisor didn't get along. Sorry, the landscape supervisor were very different. We didn't get along but we respected each other. And then I learned how I could work with him better. And you know, he just needs a couple hours to wake up in the morning. Not everyone wakes up with ADHD. Like, you're like, oh, which guy was me? It's like, geez, you're like, and he just didn't relax. End of the day, that everything to get done that was asked for. It just didn't have to be my way of going about it. He's got his own methods and respecting that, and that helped a lot when we got some HR help in. But yeah, I don't know if that answered the question. I sort of went answer about, but
I think you covered some really great things, and I definitely had that learning journey myself because my approach to being a team member, I'm a very happy person, very bubbly, and I took quite a few years to realize that there's actually certain places where that actually becomes harmful to my impact on others because they're just like the gap between my energy level and their energy level is too wide. And I come in happy and I become this antagonist and instead of being happy in a way that is supporting and lifts other people up. So what can work for us 80% of the time can also be our biggest downfall, that 10 to 20% when we misunderstand how to be flexible. So you definitely really capture that and how as a leader you were still able to respect someone even when you didn't agree and those values were so different that you kind of didn't understand each other but could respect that there was differences and you could still work together through it, which is really powerful.
oh, thank you. Yeah, it's touching on what you just said. Then I feel like it's a real push pull. Like, you come in the room and you want to brighten up the room, and it's not necessarily respecting that maybe everyone doesn't want to be on your level. And then you see, like, you get this, like, oh, a bit of a bad vibe. So then it's almost like you try and go in overdrive to bring it up again, and you're actually doing the opposite. I never thought about it the way you just explained, but how I felt it.
Yeah, and it's hard because it changes every day and every person's different, and that's I think what's hard about that black and white mentality is it doesn't give us the space to be like, "Oh, that didn't go well. Let me try slightly different next time," because there is more than one way I can approach a situation. We've had a chat in the past and you talked about something that you implemented in your team that was kind of like a strategy you use to build rapport with your workforce as, being a boss and their employees. And there's always kind of a bridge there that you can't cross when you're in those, I guess, polarizing relationships. And I'd love if you could share more about the car chats that you had with your team and how that impacted your team and your leadership.
When we got bigger, it was a team of maybe about 10. And I soon realized that, like, they got their own group chats. They've got their own things, I'm the boss. And yes, I had to put a wedge between it. And I really struggled with that because you want to be one of the boys. You hear from the camaraderie and everything, but realize you've got to have that degree of separation. And also, with that degree of separation, meant that I'm off the tools 99% of the time. And you're getting guys in, and you kind of want them to understand and respect the fact that you're telling them what to do, but they've never actually seen you do it. So they're in their head, they're like, all right, it's easy for you to say, easier said than done. But so we'd have them in, and sometimes say if you'd miss calls or you'd miss ordering something because there's that much going on, and they don't they don't get it. They don't understand, but they're not meant to understand because they haven't been in that situation before. So they called them like right, or like ride around days with Hoppo. And every now and then I'd sort of pick an employee and they'd jump in the truck with me and it'd be like, all right, you're at the factory. We're there at 5:30. You're like, what? I'm like, trust me. And I'm like, Murph, my 2RC be like, oh, you're going to ride around there with Hoppo tomorrow, mate? And they jump in and we got, bang, the phone calls that start at 6. You're at the factory setting up for the people. Like your employees come and grab their stuff, go get your coffee, first meeting, second meeting, 500 phone calls. And it was kind of my weird way of them building respect for me. I guess in a way of like, hey, like this ain't all beer and Skittles. This is it. And, I get to also get to know them a bit better. So get to know what their story, what they're like, what they like doing, and then maybe a little bit of intel on the business as well, like how I can improve. Like when you bring yourself to that even level, and they're not looking up at you and thinking, oh, I don't want to talk to him about that. And I'm thinking like, I'm busy. I don't need to talk to him about that. You have this rider around day. At the end of the day, they realize like, you might miss an order and someone might be going, oh, bloody Oppo's forgot the order. But then Jiminy might go, mate, like I was with him the other day, he had 500. It's very understandable why he might have missed an order. Yeah, it's a weird way to do it, but it works really, really well.
I like it because it's as much as it still, like, respects the fact that there is that employee-employer relationship, that you can't break that down 100% because sometimes you have to do the tough jogs and say performance isn't good, or, we need to review something, I guess, more formal in that relationship, that you still found a way to kind of bridge the gap and create visibility and respect when, you can't be on site every day with everyone, but they still have visibility, and you have that safe space to be like, I'm a person too, just trying to get shit to happen.
Yeah.
But this is what my shit looks like, and I need you to do your shit so that this all works.
To be honest, it was on my behalf, it was a little bit of a pathetic's a hard word, but it's almost a bit of a pathetic feeling for me that I had to justify, like, prove to this. You know what I mean? Like, there was always that level of like, I need to prove to you that I can do this, or like, I want to go on site, and you know what I mean? There's always that trying to not feel judged, but trying to prove myself. And
Yeah.
I just feel like it's a little bit of a toxic feeling, but it's pretty common.
Yeah, definitely. I think since I've been off the tools, I'm the same. Like, not being on the tools and even proving to myself, like, yeah, I'm a tradie, I'm a mechanic, I know things, even though I'm not on the tools every day anymore. It creates this like, but what if I'm not good anymore? Or what if I don't have the knowledge and experience to be leading this team? And I think it's that healthy imposter syndrome that helps us actually want to continue to improve, and also kind of test our confidence to make sure that that is something that we consciously invest in, because if we're growing, we're constantly feeling out of our comfort zone and like an imposter.
It's funny you mentioned that because I literally had this conversation with my partner Georgia last night. I was sort of at work yesterday because I'm just work by myself now and I'm on this enormous job. And I looked and I thought, what if I'm not that good? What if this is taking too long? And then I don't think you get this until you're a little bit older. And this is the self-awareness. I never had it until about a year and a half ago, I reckon. Now I'm like really self-aware of my feelings, my emotions, like not blowing up and just thinking about things. And I looked around, I just had this moment. I looked around at the side, I'm like, I built all of this and it's beautiful. It's all built amazing. It's a little bit longer, but everything's perfect. And I was like, it was almost, yeah, just that moment of like, all right, you are doing good. Like, stop doubting yourself. And just like you said, yeah, you need that to grow, but having that also self-awareness of like, you're doing good, man. Like, this is amazing. Like, you should be proud of yourself. And I literally had this conversation last night. So
I find it's funny how the world works in certain ways to bring conversations across gaps that just, I guess, no one else can see. You're very active as a role model on social media. What inspired you to begin that journey?
I just like talking for one. That was probably where it started. Everyone was sick of hearing me speak. So I was like, oh, I'll just speak to my phone and everyone else can hear it. I don't know. I guess, I don't know if I like subconsciously saw a gap there and I liked, so my style of getting work, I didn't like people putting up, and this is no disrespect to what people do because there's reaching different clienteles with different social strategies. And for me, I'm a bit of a country boy, live out in the valley. I don't really associate as well with like your true rat clients, and you know what I mean. It's just I couldn't really. I wasn't on the same level, so I didn't like dealing with them as much. No, and there's no disrespect in any way. It's just recognizing who you fit best with. And I liked showing people the start to finish of jobs. And then I liked the engagement of, oh, that's it. I've always wondered how you built that. And it's also of like a way of justifying my quotes, being like, geez, that looks expensive. But then they see the process and they go, oh my God, I didn't realize how much went into that before you've even broken ground. And I liked showing that process. And then it became people interested, and that's how I got employees and that's how I got jobs. So it started there. And then it's like, it was hard because, as you know, you put yourself out there, it's almost like your head's on a tee. Like people are just wanting to whack it on. So it's light in a way. I didn't know how to react in a way. But then I realized that it did help people and it made other people feel more confident to reach out and put themselves out and almost put it as I was probably one of the earlier ones in Melbourne to be doing so. And I was like, this is my obligation now. I sort of took it in my stride, like, let's make something. Let's do something cool here. And yeah, there was plenty of hate, but there was great opportunities. And it was a really good way, especially when I had kids, you not out as much. Finding people on the same wavelength as you. And I made some really good friends, some really good collaborations with jobs. And yeah, then a lot of the leadership stuff came into it. And I love it. And it almost, at different stages of it, it's changed it a lot. It was almost therapeutic for me. It was almost like making myself accountable, getting on in the morning, doing my morning vlog, like, all right, this is what I'm doing for the day. I've told the world I'm doing it, do it. And that helps a lot. Helps a lot. And it was more people like, why do you do that? I'm like, I think it's more about for me than anybody else, but follow along if you like. If you don't, I understand.
That's really interesting because it's like that morning vlog. And there's a lot of vulnerability in that because you're like, well, I'm saying I'm going to do this thing. And so when we hit those challenges or those hurdles or when things go wrong, as they so often do in the trades, you're like, oh, now I'm going to have to get on tomorrow's morning vlog and be like, well, actually, this is now my plan because X went wrong yesterday. And I can imagine, though, that that's actually really powerful for people because what I reflect on as an apprentice and even as a tradesperson now is that we often don't talk enough about the mistakes we make as tradespeople on our journeys.
Yeah.
And so there's like this idea that, oh, you can't make mistakes and like there's fear around it. So people hide mistakes or they don't feel comfortable making mistakes. And it actually sometimes hinders the learning journey. And when we create that visibility that we're making mistakes and we're 10 years plus in the industry, that is normal. And you just got to learn from it because everything is fixable. And that's the great thing about being a tradie. With time and money, 99% of things are fixable. You just got to figure out how to fix it. And sometimes you need help to do that, and that's okay.
I also felt help online from that. And that's, then you mentioned that, that was probably where it really sparked. And my Instagram then took off on another level. Is I've always tried to be real on there. And there's a couple of times that I've tried not to be. And I felt crap. And people have gone like, that ain't you, mate. That ain't you. Don't, we follow you for you. Don't try me, or you're not true to yourself. Like someone sends out a product and you're like, oh, I love this product. You're like, I say no to a lot of things now as well. People are like, you say yes to everything. I'm like, no, unless I feel comfortable about it. And being myself on there and yeah, the real stuff with being a parent and the struggles of getting up every morning sometimes when your kid's been up all night or, relationship strain and everything. I just feel like mine's become more of a trade/lifestyle page. But it's when you relate to people like that and I'm like, well, I stuffed this up and people are like, I did the same thing last week. And I'm like, how did you fix it? Or vice versa. They're like, mate, I did that the other week and I just parked it because I have no idea how to sort it out. What did you implement in that? And I'm like, roll on for this. And yeah, it's really good. It's a powerful tool. Like I can see how it can sway both ways. But I mean, look, here we are now. So
How did parenthood change your relationship with leadership and, I guess, running a business and leading a team and showing up online?
really made me accountable. Like it was, and I bet a lot of probably 99% of fathers can account to this is you feel so useless sometimes. Yeah. I can't breastfeed. I can't, there's a lot of things that I can't do. If you can't get up in the middle of the night and feed the kid back to sleep, there's almost no point you being up. That's also a hard conversation to have. You got to go to work the next day. You got to be on the power tools. I don't want to cut my arm off. I'm going to be even more useless. The biggest challenge, yeah, was trying to replace that role of like, how I can help? I can bring in money. I can work as hard as I can to make it comfortable for my family. And that's a trap sometimes. That's a big trap because you're replacing your presence with work. And in the time, you're thinking it's like a survival. You're on a survival mode, and you're like, all right, I need to work as much as I can. Look, I've got money. Look, I can buy you this. Yes, I can make you feel comfortable. Yes, we can get a cleaner in for this. It can often do the opposite. And that's something that, being out of a relationship with, now and then seeing the effects it has on your child as they grow up and not being present with them, that's what I've learned. And that's when I closed up the business, went around Australia and spent 7 months with my kids every day, and now we're best friends. We have the most amazing relationship. But that is, it reflects the leadership. It's probably the self-awareness that I try to want to draw to with that is, yeah, don't fall into the trap of feeling like, yeah, I've got to be the hardest worker. I'm setting a good example for my family. It's not always the case. But yeah, also then when some of my employees became parents, actually one of my apprentices, so one of my first main apprentices, Hopkins, I'll never forget the phone call because you know what, the reputation for new apprentices starting and if they're going to show up and what they're going to be like. And I remember driving to work. It was like quarter to 7, 20 to 7. I had this phone call, Ryan, apprentice trainee or whatever it was. And I was like, here we go. Hey, mate, here you go. Yeah, okay, Hoppo, here you go, mate. I'm just here already. Is there anything I can do before you get here? And I'm like, out of my breath. I'm like, I love you. What's that, mate? Nothing, mate. I'll see you in a minute. Like, I was like, what? And he was the best. He did pretty much his whole time with me. He finished up a little bit earlier to go and do some like renovation work that we didn't really do to try and better himself there. And he had a young fella, Billy, about 3 months before I had my first son. So he was 5, 6 years younger than me, 4, 5 years younger than me. And there was a lot of like, we could really bounce off each other a lot. And we were like growing as parents together. And then Murph, one of my foremen, he had a kid. And it's like, sorry, mate. Not that he rarely took a day off, but mate, I've been up all night and realizing if I wasn't a parent, I'd be like, but your wife's at home, you've got parents that can help, you know, then you soon realize, oh, I get it. I get it, mate. There's greater things than work. There's more important things than work, and that's family. And the more you recognize that with your staff as well, like Ryan would always take his daughter, I think it was his daughter's birthday off, which was like the 21st of December. They're like the busiest day of the year. And at the start, you're like, oh, but then you realize like how special is that he does that and how much respect I have for him that he makes that call and he has that decision with his wife. I'm like, I got to tell Hoppo, I know it's the busiest day of the year. This is my daughter's birthday, and you gain respect for it, and realize what's important, and also allowing him to have that day off. Should see how hard he went the week before. Before he had that day off, he's like, I'm having that day off. I'm going to prove to him why I'm able to have that day off and why he's always going to say yes. And it was those little things there that you're like, hell yeah, like, oh, and dad's working for me. Oh, and dad's around me.
I think the idea of flexibility really scares a lot of people in the trade sector because it's not something that they've seen. And also, I think something that we don't necessarily do well in trades is actually have those conversations about what's going on outside of work. We'll talk about the radio, we'll talk about whatever we're watching on YouTube, whatever sport we follow. But a lot of what happens at home doesn't always come to work. But when we do that, we actually open up the door for a lot more understanding and empathy that makes that flexibility easier to do and actually improves the culture and engagement of your workforce because you have that mutual respect and understanding that comes from sharing a little bit about what's going on outside of work.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. It goes a long way for everyone's understanding. Like you said earlier, if someone comes in and they're not in the mood, you sort of half know what's going on in the background and you can work around that. You're not driving them into the ground and then making them 10 times worse. And I get it. That's hard. And that is trying to create that culture and everybody feeling comfortable and realizing that everyone's not the same. But if you find that common ground and that common interest, you'd be amazed how polar opposites, how well they can get along at work and work together. But that was probably one of the biggest struggles as a leader is finding that, especially coming from a black and white background, is bringing myself down to that level, opening myself up and always being vulnerable myself, which is probably, instead of me saying it directly to them, it was probably me, my stories as well on Instagram and stuff. And then probably seeing that from a distance and go like, he might not want to sit in a room with us and bleed his heart out, but he's sort of slowly leaking in here and we're seeing it and we're recognizing it, but it's a hard one, especially for blokes, like, as we all know. But even things like this are amazing. So many people view these podcasts and Instagram stories and stuff now. And yeah, it's slowly getting better. That stigma.
Yeah, it is. It is shifting. And that's thanks to people like yourself who are role modeling that kind of vulnerability and being a whole person and not just your trade and not just everything outside of work as well. What would be your advice to other tradies about how they can show up as an everyday leader, whether they're an apprentice, running a business, maybe even having their first child or whatever they're working through in their life? What would be your advice for how they can just be that everyday leader?
Probably us would probably like to target like the apprentices more. I think it comes back to the little things of like punctuality and manners. I start That's where I start from. I feel like to all young guys out there and ladies, we can teach you skills. But rocking up on time, using your manners, show appreciation, looking your boss in the eye, even things to like handshakes. Like I teach my young fella, you should see, he lost basketball last night. But he went around, shook everyone's hand, and looked him in the eye. And like those characteristics there are where you can build a leader. You're not going to be the best chippy on day one or the best mechanic on day one or sparky on day one. But if you rock up on time, you look your boss in the eye and you're appreciative and appreciate the fact you've got a job to go to, you're alive, it's start from there. And that's a really good characteristic that's going to build your leader and it's going to get you opportunities at work.
Yeah, definitely about just showing up with what you have is enough. I really appreciate your time on the podcast today. You've definitely talked a lot and shown a lot around that value of vulnerability and consistency around being flexible but consistent. So, thank you so much for your insights today, Hoppo.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me and listening to my waffling.
It's been great waffling.
Awesome. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Tradies Who Lead and like, share, or comment your thoughts on today's discussion. It helps more tradies discover the show. You can connect with Hoppo at Hopkins Construction on Instagram and follow the podcast at Tradies Who Lead on socials. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Tradies Who Lead. I'll see you for the next one in a fortnight.